It is a very desirable building. Some of the features you can see are stucco work, balconies, cornicing. It had the original shutters, which made it very valuable from the heritage point of view. And in many ways, it made it difficult for heritage people to remain part of this project. And the start of the project showed that there was quite a degree of tension between the heritage people, English heritage, and the heritage surveyors that they part funded to kick the project off, and energy professionals, and perhaps it's the dilemma is best summarized by the position of the heritage professional, which said that the heritage value of the building meant that it shouldn't really comply or have to comply with building regulations. This, of course, would have restricted the amount of the reduction of emissions that we could have got from it. So rather than go down the heritage road, we have chosen to go down the energy savings and emissions reduction route. And I think that kind of encapsulates the dilemma, but it also starts to demonstrate that heritage is not a simple issue, and there are many perceptions of heritage. So there are two aspects to the visual and the heritage, the actual look of it, and the actual originality of the physical material. 17th St. Augustine's was quite interesting because even though it was in a bit of a dilapidated state, English heritage were surprised at how little it had changed. You could see the detailing in the mouldings, the timber mouldings, and also in the cornicing. That's because it hadn't been overpainted.
John Cowley, and I moved here in 1969, and it was a very socially mixed area. In some ways aspects of it were a little bit run down. There were workshops in the muses and a range of shops on Murray Street, and a lot of the houses were in multi-occupation. But in the early 70s, something that had been happening elsewhere in London, people buying up tenanted property, multi-occupied property, and then pushing the tenants out and then selling the houses on the private market. And when that started here, I got involved with other people in setting up a tenants association called the Camden Square Area Tenants and Residents Association. And at the same time, a year or so before, a neighbourhood association had been set up. They were interested in preserving the character of the neighbourhood, and we were really people who were concerned with maintaining its sort of social mix. We were successful in the 70s and 80s because the council bought 50 houses, including the one that's been converted, and that helped to stabilise. But once they introduced the right to buy, whenever that was, 1979, it slowly started to erode into the properties that already belonged to Camden Council or that they had purchased, you know. And so there has been a slow process of gentrification. From day one when we set up the association, the appearance of the buildings was not for us the primary concern, it was the people who lived in the buildings. And then when it comes to the refurbishment of these buildings, which were built with an upstairs and downstairs for servants to be able to exit without being seen, all that sort of thing. That was all in the past, so we knew things had to be changed within the building, just in terms of its social occupancy. So when you bring in the great concern today about sustainability and survival on the planet, and we can't use the sort of waste the energies that we have been, then there has to be just as equal a sort of compromise made in terms of the refurbishment of the building as happened after you got rid of all the servants. Now you're going through another big phase, and I think the great quality of these old Victorian houses is that they seem to be capable of going through these extraordinary transformations in terms of how they're occupied. And I would say that both in terms of the relations of people inside the building, because those family relationships have changed tremendously, men and women's relationships, and now in terms of the physical changes to the building to make them environmentally, good examples of how to live. I mean, I have one or two questions about the basement area, how the spaces have been designed, and there may be a good reason for that, but being unfurnished and unoccupied, you couldn't. But everything else, in terms of making the place as sound as possible, I really liked, and I particularly liked looking at the tiny little radiators, because my place is surrounded with enormous radiators everywhere, and that just seemed, I thought it was really attractive.